All right, I guess I'm on live now. So let me share this to like my wall, and so it is the overnight on Sunday morning, I guess, sort of. It's like a weird time. Well, you know what midnight's like. I mean, seriously, do I have to describe it at this point? Um, so right. So let's get sort of into it then. Hi! We haven't discussed things in a while. Oh snap. Do I? Yeah, my water's right here. What's left of it. So, yes, I am deeply sorry. I haven't been making regular videos. Um, I promise to change that, of course, like as of recent. I've had a lot of schoolwork. The computer that's allowing me to broadcast right now has been busy handling papers and meetings and papers and meetings and papers and meetings and meetings and presentations and papers. And I'm just like ready for summer. I would say I'd love to take summer classes, but at this point with quarantine and everything, I'm like not too crazy about the idea. I mean, because seriously, it's been a hectic time. So right, I want to get on, let everyone know I'm pretty much doing okay. Um, I would love to see what's like. Oh, there. So I can get a look at what actually is in the chat, which is kind of cool, to some degree, but it's also got its drawback. But yeah, so officially I am live. I hope everyone is doing well tonight. If you're watching this video, which I really hope you are on some level, I mean, who knows? You may not be. You may be like sound asleep like a normal person. I guess who is normal, especially like especially in this quarantine, who is like up for normalcy. It just isn't there. So I'll stop chatting like that, and let's get into the program. So yeah, one of my biggest things lately was an interesting paper I did on gender and gender variance. Uh, so a lot of you may not find it too interesting, or maybe you will. I shouldn't say you won't. So the paper was mostly based, well, it was originally going to be on like how accepting people are of like transgender, because that's I mean, that is the hot topic pretty much. But then I'm like, well, wait a second. Why limit it there? Why not take it all the way to find out like what people thought of gender variance? And a lot of people are out there thinking like, okay, now what is the difference, Abby? I mean, what's the distinction like between someone who's transgender or a topic of like transgender and gender variant. So anyway, so transgender covers like this spectrum of what's under the trans umbrella, which today is usually taken as a general thing. But the thing that's interesting about it, and as far as these discussions, is that it still extends or implies boundaries, like the genders are set, even when they're non binary or whatever. The boundaries may be strange, but they're there. So this was, I wanted to explore once I got into like the transgender, I started seeing like, I don't know, it was patterns. And I'm like, wait a second here. This is like interesting. And even the people who are accepting are somewhat cagey about answering. So I'm like, what's going on here? And then what am I missing? So then I extended it. So like, or rather built it out. So what I started it was like, you walked in there and the first thing I asked you is how you perceive gender identity. And the responses were very intriguing. Um, of course, there were a good number that that identified like um gender within the terms of a binary construct, which is always intriguing to me because it's like, how can you be in this day and age understanding like the variations of human existence and then try and like define that in a binary? You just can't. Um, of course, you had like the minority, the vocal minority, who's absolutely appalled at anything outside of biology. Like, there is only two genders because there's only two biologies. I don't get it. I mean, I know what it's getting at, but it's, we know, or at least we should know nowadays, that biology is not that simple. But that's getting like outside the scope of the study because obviously this was a 4 to 5 week study. So I couldn't get into all that. But what I did get into sort of leaned into it. So then I lead you in. And the first thing I'm like, and this is very telling as well. Um, so the first thing I get into is how do you identify within terms of gender? Now, I specifically didn't say what gender are you or anything that would limit one, because this is a qualitative study project. But two, I really, really want to open it up. So I'm like, how do you identify in terms of gender and be as elaborate as you feel? And there were people who were obviously stuck in a binary sense and they like closed themselves down in one sentence, but then there were those who extended out and even though they identified, but the one I found the most intriguing was the ones who was binary, and it was just like the usual turf response. And I'm like, how could you say that here? I mean, that is such an overused limitation, but then you're in the marginalized gender. How could you like marginalize yourself further with this logic? So the answer was, in short, I'm a woman born female. So it's like, no, you're a human born human. you have certain biology and organs, but that doesn't bear you to be a gender or a gender type. So, a lot to go. But the real meat and potatoes were the next two questions. So I said, how do you feel about non binary? Again, and I had people who came back and asked me, they're like, well, what do you mean? What are you asking? Like, how do I feel about I'm just like, no, just like in general, and be as elaborate as you can be, like in the terms you understand it. Just like go like all out on it. How do you feel about non-binary? And the interesting part of this was like a huge portion were overwhelmingly accepting, and I'm going to get by back to why this is interesting in a moment. Or in the next question rather, and my last. So the overwhelmingly accepting. There was one in the middle of the road, sort of. Somehow, someone who was accepting attached non-binary to biology? I'm I'm sorry, I don't get it. But then again, when you hear the last question, you'll get why the study was interesting. So the and then you had the one thing who definitively said, "Well, it's sort of weird. There's no biological proof." So yeah, you had that as well. Um, but here's the next question is when it really gets interesting. Now, a lot of people take um are sort of offset about any gender that's neutral or apathetic. So these include things like agender, neutroids, and other things. Where you don't have the structural boundaries that you would in a uh, oh god in a structured gender type world where it's like clear boxes, male, female, other, male, female, non-binary, male, female, that type of thing. So in it's just like here you're saying, what do you believe about amorphous genders, genders that don't have these boundaries, that you know they may have certain qualities in a lot of respects, but they aren't particularly ground in old school ideals of like we have only two camps or everyone's limited to one aisle or the other based on what they identify with. So, and this is where it gets interesting because you have the one outlier who's like everything's connected to biology. So that you're instantly putting out to pasture. You know where that's going. However, the overwhelming majority who was supportive, this is where it gets like, oh, there are other parts where it's interesting, but I'll get to that later. So one part where this gets interesting is this thing of like, okay, we're supportive, all of a sudden splits in, and I had to codify this based on the language of the answers. So they split into two schools. One school is like, yeah, we accept them no matter what. They're like that still. The other school, however, says we accept them, but and they start using language which implies policing the boundaries. Like we accept them, but and there's mentions of male and female in there. So all of a sudden we gotta establish boundaries. We gotta tell them they have to be this way. And that's interesting because if you take what they said about non-binaries, like a lot of them were like, "Oh yeah, you can be any way you want to, and this and that." and then take it to the next question and hear the same people go, "Oh, yes, they can be who they want to be. They just can't push on me, or they can be the way they want to be. Science hasn't proven how many genders there are yet, but male and female, it's all between male and all of a sudden you get these policing of boundaries in gender politics, and you're like, wait a second here. So are these people actually like accepting, or are they the softer side of tolerating? Let me explain. So most people are tolerating of the atheists, and this is a difficult thing to swallow for most people, because most of the people out there are Christian. So they have to accept that the majority of them and their friends are tolerating, and the other people tend to go along with that. Which, if you understand what I'm getting at, which I'll explain right here, you'll see the problem in. So atheism is simply the non-belief because it hasn't been proven. So I don't feel that God's proven. Therefore, for me, God hasn't been proven to exist. It's not that God doesn't exist. It's not that God isn't out there. It's not that, but I am not making the assumption that you are. When you take faith, and it's implied in the word, you are making an assumption. As an atheist, I choose not to make the assumption first. I choose to seek the proof first. And if the proof does not present, I do not believe. It has nothing to do with me being an angst with believers. You want to believe? Great. I'm all for you. You put up a post, you're sick. I'll say you're in my thoughts. I won't say I'm praying for you, or at least I don't think I say it. Most of the time, I know I don't, because I'm very guarded about the language. I don't want to give the wrong impression to someone. So when they go, "Oh, thank you," and because, but at the same time, if a Christian comes to me and goes, "Oh, I'll keep you in my prayers and God bless you," when I'm sick, I'm fine with that. I have no problem with well intent. So, but where the thing comes in, and where I'll explain this is problematic, is a lot of the time the way um people who are deists refer to atheists are in terms of like, "Oh, I'm fine with them so long as they don't push their views," which is an irony, because the people end up pushing the views the most are the people who are religious. So then that language is used to police atheists from defending their position when theists come down. "Oh, how do you disprove God?" I don't have to. God has not been seen. God is not a default position, such as I don't have to disprove guilt in murder. I'm sitting right here. Unless you can point me at a murder scene and put evidence in there, you I had nothing to do. The burden of proof is on you for accusing me. The same way, the burden of proof for proving God to me, at least, and in general, I would say, is on the people who say he exists. You make a positive claim, you must produce positive evidence, but that's getting outside the topic. My point is the line of like policing in language concerning atheists is usually used to guilt trip them and to confine them into these boxes, so they don't interact with the rest of society. And when the rest of the society attempts to convert them, they have no defense. And that's just like illogical, it's unspeakable, and in its extreme, take for example the Spanish Inquisition. It is absolutely immoral and unethical, and if God exists, a huge sin. Think about it. Um, so that being said, let's go back. So this comes to policing of gender. Most of the time, the people tend to police gender and push gender views are people who are guarded about the old school binary system. Men are men, women are women. Archie Bunker was right. We should all go with women in the kitchen and men doing the only manual labor out that gets paid. That's the key word. They do the only manual labor that gets paid. It wasn't that they were the only ones doing it or gets paid well, depending, you know. But yeah, so here's the bottom line on that. You can't do that. Um, you have to say you're accepting of my identity, you're accepting of who I am, and then that's it. The rest is a whole different discussion. And here's the thing, like usually things like someone who's transgender or someone who's with Black Lives Matter, it isn't a point of bringing them up of valid concerns. What it is when things start changing a lot, people bring them up as a defense to it and to roll things back under some mystic flag. Like there was a lot of trans hate posted by people over this latest thing with the books, with the book, with the Dr. Seuss books and the Mr. Potato Head, and I'm like, why? You want to take on that issue? Go for it, but don't bring trans people into this. And the rumor that somehow like trans women are men walking into bathrooms and all this other BS is a lie. It's a legitimate lie. Statistically, most women, cis or trans, are raped by cisgender men. That's a fact. It's like structurally in there. I am not saying that cisgender women cannot do it. I'm not saying transgender women cannot do it or transgender men cannot do it. They are capable. And I'm sure if you look, you will find someone who has done it. That isn't the point, though. The majority, the absolute majority, if you take out those statistics, are cisgender men. And here's another fact, they do it to transgender women and cisgender women. Guess where? In the same places, in the home, in protected places in the school, often. Um, they do it in private situations, such as on like when they both agree to get a hotel room, like after a date night and have a little fun. They do it then, or something along those lines. That's when they do it, and they do it to both to all of the above, actually, but mostly to like anyone in the category of women, meaning cisgender, transgender, non-binary. They do it to them. The difference is between them is actually a nuanced one. With cisgender women, they shame them out of life. They make it impossible for them to get justice, and they they sort of like make them ashamed of themselves. With transgender women, they just shut them out of life completely, and then they dump them in some dumpster or some suitcase. That's the difference. But they do it to both types of women, or all types of women, or a lot of genders actually. Cisgender men are a very strange breed. And I know I've said that before. And for the first one who jumps up and goes, but not all men, that line is pretty old. And, trans men, I'm not including in that because for obvious reasons. Um, So right, and in the restroom, by the way, the greatest victims of violence are people who are transgender. In fact, statistically, it is transgender men attempting to use the men's room who are under the greatest amount of violence because they usually get physically assaulted. Seriously, consider that for 2 seconds. If you're like so sure of where things go and you see this person who you're thinking, why would you even, why would you there's no reason. Oh Lord. Okay, sorry about that. The I don't know why that cut out like that for a second. So yeah, why would you? It's like, why would you do something like take a transgender man who's entering the men's restroom, who he's made all his commitment in belonging in there, and he's legitimately going in just to go and then get out. Why would you go after him and break his arm? Yeah, that's like a pretty high rate of the assaults that happen in there. Mainly because, again, statistically, most of the assaults done on transgender people and cisgender women are by men. And it's not to say that anyone else doesn't do it. It's just the statistics. Um but yeah, so this is why I consider this so interesting. And another thing I found really interesting was this. So and this makes a very good discussion. So when I did the survey, and I asked them how they identify, right? So you got well, I actually got someone who is neutral, which was kind of cool. But discounting that person, um, the ones that identified with female had a very rigid like notion. And the interesting part is most of the ones who identified as male seemed less attached to it. And I pondered this, and I think I've come up with an opinion as to why. And I think a lot of people viewing this can like actually like agree, disagree, or like, but I think this is a pretty good point and a pretty good question. So, like, I think in the case of the women who strongly identify as female, they just didn't say female. They said I'm female and blah blah blah. So they were like solid in that answer. I think what it is this. So like I think for women, now one would say, okay, there were views along that in that and this sort of taking their oppressor's side, and I could see that, but I'm thinking it's more or less like a reclaiming something as an emblem of pride. Um, so it's and I'd be interested to hear anyone viewing this video and what they think of my logic, because really I really want to completely understand it. So um Yeah, I think it's a matter of pride. So when they call that out, for them it's like solidarity. Yeah, we're standing strong now. And it sort of like makes sense, you know? I think the interesting one was men, which is what gave me part of the answer. So when the men said, I identify as male or man, but and then they went on to say, but my overall internal experience is human, but I don't believe I could define my core experience. So what I think that is like, so we talk about like how gender, um oh, what's a good word for it? How gender, gentrification, like gentra, but instead of like that, it's gender, so gentrification. Yeah, the rigid constructs of gender. I think in that scope, we often talk about what's done to women, but we barely speak about what it must be doing to men as well. Because let's face it, um, men are not allowed to be as fluid in their expression. And one reason is like there's always the suggestion because women are seen as upgrading their status when they do something masculine, but men downgrading. But then you got to think, why would you care? But here's the thing, if you think about it, like if the men are supposed to be on top of like the food chain in this dynamic, and you have a man who's representing your whatever you want to call it at this point. I give up on the air quotes. Um, as weaker by expressing feminine, then they're actually in some way doing you a disservice. So it's not just like I think like maybe it's that men, and just to like clarify for something, so I transitioned, but I was never in that category of like men. So like there's let's push that aside because I want to be clear for the reasons of this discussion going forward. Um because I don't get it. So much of what I get, what much of what I'm getting at is purely hypothetical. And I know there's a lot of you, um, transgender, cisgender men and women who can have answers to these questions that I just don't get. And that's why I'm like, but I think and anyone could correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like male culture puts them each both as like a guard of the patriarchy as well as a representative of its strength. So basically when you like do something like that, it will be taken not just as displaying yourself as weak, but representing us all as weak, almost like attacking us personally. Um, so I'm wondering if that's not part of where this is coming from. And okay, so I'm babbling on, but okay, so that's why this answer was interesting because in the age of the evolving woman, they claim that label more, and I think it's more for solidarity and as a cry of unity. Um, so in men, maybe for them, it's like it's always been a cry of unity, like we must protect the patriarchy. We must make this so. We must be emotionless. We must be whatever. So maybe these answers clarify a point on the evolving male that says that as men go forward, as the gender um dichotomy is deconstructed, that they will be less interested in guarding the sense of like normalcy that we've gotten so used to seeing. So for them, it's like, yes, I'm a man, but at my core, it's a human experience. Meaning, I'll throw on a dress, I'll do anything. I'm still a man. That's just what it is. And I think the acceptance of that is probably what I saw, and probably what the whole survey like revealed, which I find the most fascinating. I'll be right back. All right, so here we are back. So yeah, I mean that does lend itself to an interesting question. Don't ask. So yeah, that does like bring us to like an interesting point there. Like, what exactly are we feeling? Um, so yeah, it could be quite intriguing. So yeah, I mean that I found those two things to be quite like interesting. Like, because usually you'd expect like men to be very in favor of the dichotomy of genders and enforcing them, and women less interested. But it sort of seems like, yeah, it's I don't know yet. It's perplexing. Um, but yeah, there are long papers that talk about this, and I couldn't include them as part of the study because it was a qualitative paper that had to be completely researched and written by me. So that's why I've been driving myself crazy. Oh, oh man, oh, the love of these things. So right, okay. But yeah, no, I have read the studies, and there's quite a few intriguing things about them, including the idea notion they just mentioned, like the rigid conformity of men imposed on the patriarchy as compared to women, and why the idea of a woman doing drag is taken as less offensive than a man doing drag. So that was like pretty kind of like interesting to see how it played out in the questions on that paper, because you think we'd be like, if they're accepting genuine non-binary genders, you'd assume we'd be past this, but apparently not. Strange. And there you go. So it is now 3 o'clock. We began this about like 15 minutes after the hour. I'm now at 3 o'clock. Hey, Echo, what's the weather like this morning? What's the weather like for Wednesday? Echo, what's the weather like for Wednesday? Holy smoke. It's going to be 56 when I have to go out for my mammogram. There you go. So, right. Yeah, an interesting dive into gender like politics and dynamics. Aside from that, where else could I go with this video right now? I mean, I really shouldn't like stay up on this too long. Monday morning comes soon and I gotta be awake. Da-da. Yeah, so so anyone hear about that asteroid that came out recently? That one that oh shit. Jennifer. Hey Jennifer, how you doing? I didn't even see you there before. So has anyone like heard of this like asteroid they have now? Apparently it's like it the one of them's Amua. One of them is claiming it might be a part of an extraterrestrial structure. Fun. Like seriously. Oh no, I know what. You know what? I don't know which channel I should bring it. I mean, I don't know where I should put it then. I'm not sure if it's being on like here. But I saw like two interesting hmm, sorry, Neil deGrasse videos recently, and together they culminated like and covered the question of like how can we figure out like the mind um through using our brains, and that's a pretty intriguing question, but it's not exactly transgender specific. I am like a science nerd. You get me on some of this stuff, I can go for hours, and I guarantee you, I have Neil deGrasse Tyson like lined up for hours this evening. I should see if Lisa Randall has like a series as well, and a few other people. I love that stuff. Uh aside from that, I think it's getting late enough. It's like 3:03. Um, Echo, can you speak Klingon? Apparently, it does. So, um, that device never ceases to amaze me or amuse me. So right. What else was I going to say? Right. So, uh, yeah, I definitely have. You know what? We should like get a transgender person in physics next. I think that would be death. Like we got lawyers, we got pop artists, we have doctors now, we have surgeons. What else have we gotten? I mean, we're getting a lot of places nowadays. We're getting into government. I think one of the few places we're not like at least notably seen in is something like physics. And I think that would be like we and cisgender women could like take that thing hand in hand and just blow up the whole STEM field. I think that would be phenomenal. Huh, could be fun. So, right, little trans rainbow and my Bitmoji from like when? I think it was like a year ago up, but you know, it's still like me and it's still, I guess, cute. So, right, okay. We are now at 3:06 and my device is begging me to play the song Shallow. So that should tell you where we're um yeah, sorry I didn't see you there before, Jennifer. I really would have liked to like talk to you more, but you know, the problem of going on live and going back and forth. Also, wait, when is International Women's Day? Isn't it soon? I thought it I gotta remember when it is, among other things. Um, right, okay. Yeah, I got so many things on my plate right now. I can't remember what day is up. I'm lucky I remember most of the dates. The week oh yes, the week of Margaret Purtell is coming up. What do I mean by that? My paternal Irish grandmother. Um, to answer short, her birthday, the day she died, and her favorite holiday are all coming up within the scope of a week. March 14th, 17th, and 19th. That's why I get the dates confused. That they're all basically attributed to her. Um, I should have like big notes on them somewhere, really, especially given my memory. So, what was I going to check? International Women's Day. Yeah, because someone just sent me like a happy International Women's Day from like Australia, and I'm like, wait, when the hell is that? I know it's like right around the corner. I thought originally it was the 26th, but I don't think it can be that. So, ooh, it's Monday, March 8th. It's literally today. I am such a dope. So, happy International Women's Day to basically all my sisters out there. I have the real one right next to me in the other room. Ah, so right. Oh boy. I'm trying to think of so many things. My brain just has gone like bing, and now like I gotta get up all those spark plugs and everything and just reinsert them. Right. So I guess I should like give it a good night and just let everyone go and let myself hit the pillow cuz you know, obviously if I'm forgetting something as basic as my grandmother's birthday or International Women's Day, obviously like and that's it. That's the only way to explain it. So right, okay. It is International Women's Day, Monday, March 9th at 3:10 in the morning. I am going to be stopping this at 5 minutes short of an hour, as if that matters to most of you. I'm sure when you wake up and see this at like 7 or 8 in the morning, you'll be like, what the hell was she thinking? Mm, I don't know what to tell you. I honestly don't. If you figure it out, this will also end up on YouTube, and if I could get it more places, you'll be guaranteed it will be going there. Aside from that, I hope you all have a good evening, and hopefully, like once I get past a few obstacles and roadblocks, I will definitely be going back to a recording schedule. And as far as this, like part of the thing is like I don't have a green screen, but that works both ways. So when I did one video in Linux the other day, you saw like I have a green curtain over back here, and that green curtain like made my background, which was okay on here, look extraordinarily neat and like high resolution. So what I'm going to start to do from here on so yeah, that was also because so the camera on the MacBook, I believe, is HD. The external camera I have now, which I can't use on here for some odd reason, it's a software issue. Um, but on Linux it works fine, is 4K. And so I'll be able to get us a lot better video on that. And for live streaming, ser- I mean, I kid not. The performance on their Linux was substantially better. Um, they gave me a little warning on the virtual background because of processor being only a fourth gen, but it worked a hell of a lot better than what it did over here. So I am really looking forward when I do get like a green curtain to extend all the way out, to trying that out and see how that works. And if it works well, I might do a regular recording schedule based on that. Uh, also I'm always threatening to get like what's in back of me straightened up and some to some extent, but I really can't do it because it's not on mine. Um, but yeah, so I guess I'm just delaying the inevitable. It is now 3:13, 2 minutes before the hour. No, before an hour elapses. So before I get myself into more trouble, I would like to bid you all a good night and hope to see you tomorrow. And like seriously, have a nice day. Or yeah, you should be getting up in a couple of hours. So have a gorgeous day. I love you all, and we'll talk again soon. All right. Have a good night. Oh, no, 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 no. Dee, 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 dee.